You're set up and I know you're eager to play. Before diving into the details of all the game mechanics, let's quickly run through gameplay at a high level. Syndicate is played over 6 to 8 rounds. The game ends the round after the beginning of the end card is drawn from the Sovereign deck. As you recall from setup, the beginning of the end card is shuffled into the Sovereign deck somewhere in the 5th, 6th, or 7th position, so you won't know exactly when the game will end. The player with the highest Syndicate score at the end of the last round wins. A player's Syndicate score is the sum of their Sovereign credits, which will constitute the majority of the Syndicate score, and their victory points, which players win as awards for reaching certain milestones. Victory points are fairly straightforward, so we won't go into too much detail. In short, there are 5 awards laid out in the bottom right of the game board. Each award tells you how to win it, and how many victory points you get if you do win it. If you win an award, place one of your player cubes in that corresponding box. Only one player can claim each award, and if there's a tie, neither player gets to claim it. So what about Sovereign credits? There are 2 main paths to wealth creation in the Arcturian underbelly. You can complete all sorts of nefarious schemes, aka missions, or you can own income-generating criminal bases, which you can either purchase, trade for, or seize through violent means from other players. While missions and bases are the core of wealth creation, there are a number of other actions players can do on their turn to enhance their strategies. We'll cover these in more detail in subsequent videos. Each of the 6 to 8 rounds has 3 phases: the player turn phase, the Sovereign card phase, and the resource collection phase. Let's start with the player turn phase. During the player turn phase, starting with whoever has the player 1 marker, players one at a time take any number of actions they'd like until they decide to pass their turn to the next player clockwise. When it's your turn, there are 8 possible actions you can take, which you can do in any combination. 2 of the actions, missions and assaults, require rolling an action die, and since players have 2 action die per round, you can only attempt 2 of either missions or assaults, or 1 of each in a round. Otherwise, there are no per se limits on the number of actions you can take. It's important to note that on your turn is the only time you can manage resources via exchange rates or by discarding unwanted operation cards. So if you expect to need resources later in the round, you'll need to plan ahead on your turn. The one action you cannot take on your turn is trading with other players. In fact, players can only trade or negotiate alliances when it's not their turn. Once you've taken all the actions you want to take, announce the end of your turn, and the player clockwise to you will begin their turn. We'll cover all the actions in more depth in subsequent videos. The player turn phase continues until all players have acted and the last player ends their turn. Then the round moves into the Sovereign card phase. Draw the top Sovereign card and read it to all players. Sovereign cards are for the most part punishments that have a dynamic severity linked to the alert level. After the Sovereign card is drawn, players have an option to bribe themselves out of the punishment by paying political capital or by playing the pardon card. Players that do not have the means or desire to bribe themselves out of the punishment, one at a time beginning with player 1 and moving clockwise, resolve the Sovereign card based on the card's instructions. Once a Sovereign card is resolved, you can discard it and move into the 3rd and final phase of the round, the resource collection phase. This phase is also covered in more depth in a later video, but at a high level, as the name suggests, this is the phase where you collect resources based on your Sovereign's racketeering income as well as from bases you own and other related bonuses. During this phase, you'll also reset used action die and assault reinforcements, market a tech or military research, clear cubes from the market, and draw new operation cards. When everyone has collected their resources and reset, you'll pass the player 1 marker clockwise and start the next round, beginning with the player turn phase. Well, that's gameplay in a nutshell. If this section moved too quickly, don't worry, we'll cover the more confusing bits in more detail in upcoming videos.